what can you tell us about the diet he had to follow?
At the end of the day, we know exactly where his calorie load is to get him to gain weight, and when we try to reduce calories, we know the exact number that gets him to drop it to the right. And that took a history.
As far as anything that you require he stays away from during training, is there anything that he cannot touch?
No, because I think we look for longevity, and you got to understand people's psychology. So the worst thing you can do, and this is they call it the marshmallow test, or I call it the polar bear test. It's like if somebody comes to me and like, oh, I've been dieting and I took out chocolate and I took out alcohol, well, that's the wrong mentality to get to where you want to go. It's like you probably did the right action. Like those things don't help in improving your physique, but the mental state that goes into taking it away is deprivation. And so if I tell somebody, don't think about polar bears, well, you're going to think about polar bears. And if I tell somebody like, hey, look, these aren't the best things, like chocolate, alcohol, stuff like that, that's not what we're aiming to get. If you get all this stuff in first, then we'll look at what we can fit in, and suddenly it switches and it becomes a lifestyle change that you can hold on to. Now there's certain times during a leaning phase or whatnot where you could essentially say, you can't have any of these things, otherwise we won't make our day. That day does come, but it's also not very long. And the reward, how our bodies reward and how our brains reward us, I think it's very important not to be in a state of deprivation in order to be successful.
What kind of training that you give Henry to offer it for others that are inspired by his success? I mean, is it something that they can come up to you and say, like, can you do that for me?
I do. In this scope, it's limited because the communication needs to be there. The reason I'm able to do things with Henry and get him to react in a way that seems otherworldly is because I can watch him on the day and see what he needs on the day. And that's the real difference. Is there's no program or Excel sheet that tells you what to do and when to do and how to eat and when to eat that can be written ahead of time that works that well. Like there's no there's no superhero training plan that is in existence that works without considering the individual. So I do offer those services for others, but they have to be under the constraint of, well, how much can I actually affect this situation? Now, consultation is one thing, like I'd be glad to give advice to other people, but wanting somebody to, take me through the process that I took Henry through would have to be there in person, and it's just a scheduling problem.
Now that you're shifting, you did the superhero training, and now it might be a little bit more military type of training. How is that going to be different for you and for him? And
extremely different, especially in the psychological sense, and extremely different in the sense of there's no way to make a superhero feel like a superhero. But there is a way to make somebody who's representing military personnel feel like they're in the military. And it generally has to be done in the mud, face down, and grueling, this whole thing that we imagine the military goes through. Well, we can provide that to people. Like, we can show them the experience that our military goes through.
Put them in the mud.
We can put you in the mud. And that's generally the best way to put it. But in preparation for whatever military role comes up, I source my own ways of resembling it, not necessarily mimicking it, because I think that would do injustice to the people that actually have to do it. But I think, for us, becoming capable is also what goes into the role. And if he couldn't do the thing in real life, well, he wouldn't want to represent it falsely. So from my understanding, he will be very willing to put himself in a position to understand whatever military role might hold.
And have you done any of that training? I mean, has he started any of it with you specifically?
Yeah, we talked about such things before it was even an option, and so planning went into it even before we were done with the last project. And some of the break in his rest has been to start accumulating these miles that military put on their backs and on their feet. So trekking, hiking, running, all these things, push-ups, pull-ups, very basic stuff. Well, if you get used to those, then it won't be such a shock when we need you to put the hammer down. The real shocking thing for me is watching him move like a real athlete. Watching somebody who becomes, who was clumsy, regain their balance and regain dexterity and be able to be nimble and jump. And a lot of that happened on the first one when we reached our goal of getting big. we kind of shut that down. And that sounds weird to a lot of people because, if you can get bigger, why wouldn't you do? And it's like, well, at some point it becomes grotesque, it becomes unnecessary. And time spent, like if you're strong enough, you're big enough, switch and work on your weaknesses. And for him, a lot of what I saw as a weakness is being able to run and jump and move like you would see somebody do if they had supernatural ability. So a heavy diet of gymnastics and tumbling were actually what we started to do. And that was before we knew about any military role, but a lot of that will come into play when he needs to run and jump and shoot guns.
And when you shift back from the military role back to the superhero role, which won't be that much time you have.
I haven't thought about it too much because I try to just do one thing at a time, but obviously there needs to be a prep period in order. The good thing about it is because he doesn't slack off, it's not a 100% on and then 0% off for him. It's really easy to shift. What a lot of people will notice is the more physical you are throughout your life, the easier it is to retain. Like it doesn't take so much. Henry's always looking to better himself. Like he wants to do it bigger and better. It's not such a matter of like, I can get away with whatever because I've proven it once. It's coming back to be either stronger in reality and more fit in reality and looking better in reality so that when it's proposed on the screen, it comes across that he's better and bigger and he's learned. And I think that's one of the cool developments, especially how Zach envisioned this whole thing, is we saw Henry develop, in reality from a boy to a man and then into a superhero. And to me, he's done the same thing in real life. I've watched him transform and he continues to evolve. And that's what keeps me interested, is that he's willing to evolve. Therefore, I have to think and I have to stay on my toes. I have to come up with interesting ways to make him suffer.
Like what?
Workouts that will entice him to know that he hasn't reached the pinnacle of fitness, and workouts that will let him know that he's well on his way. He does phenomenal feats of strength that any person who has lifted weights for any numerous of years could be impressed with. But the numbers don't really mean anything to me. It's just part of the evolution. Watching him be inspired by other fit people is also, his recognition of other capable human beings is another experience that I got to share with him. In Detroit, Henry was interested enough that I had a couple competitions because I think that keeps me level-headed and humbled all the time because it would anybody. And he was nice enough to come with as a friend and support. But he was a great ambassador of sport and health in that aspect because he got to see, what people were capable of that are just walking on the street every day. Girls that are half his size lifting weight that he's never seen before. It's like that was really impressive to him.
It's hard to be away from your significant other when you're filming and doing like a long sketch. I'm guessing you're about to start doing that again now with Henry again.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
The best we can, but I always refer back to friends of mine that are in the military, and we have it pretty good. Like it's a long time without seeing your significant other, but I have to think that there's some people that their loved ones will go overseas and they'll fight and they won't ever come back, or the risk is there that they aren't going to come back the next day. And it's like, we live a pretty easy lifestyle even if we're away from each other. It's like, I have a nice hotel, we talk often. Not a lot of people have that option. So in trying to deal with my own, like, oh, boo-hoo, I feel sorry that I can't see my wife, which is really upsetting at some points, especially if it's closer to a year. It's like, at some point, it's like, well, I will, though.
Tell me a little bit about, you have a new site?
I believe in giving back. I've written for quite a while, and it's still developing. It's a skill that I haven't completely, mastered, as not many people have. So in practicing writing, for a long time, my articles were behind a pay site. And when I, started to go off on my own, it was really important to me to give back to those that have given to me. And in doing that, it's just sharing information. And, whether it's opinionated information or, very scientific, matter-of-fact information, I like other people to be able to read it and decide for themselves whether what I do or what I take people through is important to them. The site is just kind of an expression of that. It's articles that I write about fitness, sometimes mostly psychology, sometimes nutrition. And, you know, oftentimes I'll write about my clients. Obviously not personally or keep some details out, but in the ways that I'm impressed by them and in how their effect affected me.
And what is the feedback you've gotten?
So far, it's very positive. A lot of fans of your site as well, Henry Cavill fans, have commented and actually gotten a hold of my wife for training and been inspired by the thing that Henry does, which is he's an ambassador for first and foremost the Royal Marines, but he's also an ambassador for health and fitness. And his lifestyle, not just what he appears on screen, how he lives, is really, it transfers back on me, and people want to know how he did that thing.